What would you do if your weekly meeting with your mentor turned into a murder scene? Jill Madison, the heroine of the Art Center Mystery Series, deals with exactly that scenario in Death in a Bygone Hue, the latest release by Susan Van Kirk. Welcome to Blackbird Writers Presents Author Interviews, and welcome to you, Susan.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I'm happy to be here.
We're glad you came. Thank you so much. So my first question is why did you go the art route with your cozy series?
Good question. When I began writing mysteries, I did a series about a small town in the Midwest called Endurance, and that series is still going on. But after a while, I thought I really need to kind of go in another direction. And just prior to the pandemic, I went down to our local arts center, which is on our public square. I live in a small town in Illinois. And the person who directed it gave me a tour of the entire building, including all the nooks and crannies. And when we got to the basement, I thought, oh, this is the perfect place to hide a secret. And that's kind of what inspired me to use an art center for my cozy mystery. And I've always written cozy mysteries. I'm not big on violence and that type of thing.
Yeah, no, they're quite charming, and just delightful and filled with people that you want to hang out with. So exactly what a cozy should be.
Thank you. I hope.
I think it's in your bio, or it's in your description of Death in a Bygone Hue, that you say something about that basement, and then it's like, seriously, don't go down there. And I love
Right.
that.
Don't go down to the basement.
So I'm gonna, just because you mentioned that you live in a small town, so this series takes place in Apple Grove, small
Yes.
town in Illinois. So is that a real place, or is it a fictional place? What have you based it on? Just tell us all about Apple Grove.
Well, okay. It is actually a small town in downstate Illinois, which is exactly where I live. And I grew up in a small town about 15 miles away from where I am now. And I love the charm of small towns. When I first moved here, we lived in a Victorian house that had 5 apartments in it, but it used to belong to just one family. And it was huge. There was a ballroom on the 3rd floor. And so I've used that house in some of my mysteries. But the town of Apple Grove is actually 2 towns combined, Monmouth and Galesburg. And I called it Apple Grove because the original art center here was built in an apple grove, the building was. And so that's why I did that. The art center inspired me. The building here in Monmouth is from the 1870s. And the woman that runs the art center now, Christine Gilbert, is just amazing. And she had to bring this building up to code, which was just really hard. So I'm going to show you just really fast here. This is going to be backwards, isn't it? This is the first book. Oh, it's okay. Death in a Pale Hue. And the second book is Death in a Bygone Hue. The third one will be called next summer, Death in a Ghostly Hue. And let me just read you one paragraph, if I could,
Please.
which will give you an idea of why I love this small town. Jill Madison says, wandering to work on Saturday morning, I spied 3 young girls on bicycles, possibly ages 8 or so, at the stop sign on Mary Street. They chatted and laughed, one of them checking the chain on her bike. They could have been Angie, our friend Carolyn, and me 22 years ago on a Saturday morning with the freedom to do anything we wanted. When I was young, I didn't realize how special it was to grow up in a small town surrounded by corn and bean fields, loved by 2 parents, teased by 2 brothers, and able to ride anywhere on our bikes. Later, when I left for college and made friends with people from bigger cities, I realized I was the lucky one who had played through my childhood in Apple Grove. If for no other reason, I cherished being back here in my hometown to watch my niece and nephew grow. Working in an art center that continued my mother's legacy was a bonus. So, a lot of things about this small town are important.
Well, you know, and I personally have just moved back to the town that I grew up in, and it's not quite that
Oh,
small. It's about 80,000 people. So, but it's a
oh,
small
no.
city. And you still you know all your neighbors, and it's really delightful. And again, I didn't realize just how special that was. I was like, I have gone to school with these people since kindergarten and I want to leave. But
Right.
now it's just like, of course you know the librarian, and of course you know it's really delightful. So I'm really
Oh,
appreciating
sure.
small town, and I loved
Well,
reading about Apple Grove.
well, thank you. And kind of like you and what you're talking about, Jill has a best friend, Angie, that she has known ever since they were in kindergarten, and they get into lots of trouble together. But you're right. You know everybody. But on the other hand, people also knew Jill Madison when she was growing up, and
Yeah,
now she comes as an adult, and she's kind of got to prove herself all over again.
yeah, exactly. There's like well, you left, not sure you're worth it.
Right.
Something you just read in that paragraph, talking about teased by her two brothers, and one of her brothers is in law enforcement, and that's how she gets that inside track of information. And in a lot of cozies, it would be the detective that she dates for that. But we have our little romances in a different direction. So I really liked that this was just kind of a different way to have that relationship, because you know police don't like it when you mess with stuff like that. So the brother
True.
thing just works beautifully. So I kind of want to know your inspiration for that. Did you have brothers? Um,
Um, yes, I do. I do have two brothers actually, but I was in the middle with them, and Jill is at the end of these two brothers. And frankly, they are very, very different, which is nice because you learn a lot about Jill from her relationships with the two brothers.
yeah.
Tom, the detective, is Mr. Law and Order, and he does everything by the book, and he's very conservative, and he's always trying to protect Jill and make her stay out of his business. And then Andy is kind of the wild child who's in a rock band and owns a business and is just kind of crazy. So the fact that they're so different is great. And one of the themes of the first book in the series is about family.
Mhm.
And this family is trying to figure out who they are because the parents were killed 6 years earlier in a terrible car accident. So now you have three adults that are in their 20s and 30s trying to figure out how they relate to each other without the parents there anymore. So that was a good thing that I could do to show what the characters were like. Yeah.
Yeah, it really those relationships really do show, different sides of Jill, and I think it works really well.
Thank
The Death in a Bygone Hue also has family issues. You got some messed up families going on. You've got family secrets. So I kind of feel
you.
like family is important to you.
It is very.
Keeps just popping up. All right.
Uh,
So your main character paints in oils, and I was
yes,
wondering why you chose that medium over, say, watercolor or something else, sculpture.
I think she maybe describes that in the first book. I could be wrong. They're kind of beginning to blend for me. Um, she says, oil paintings are more forgiving. If you screw something up, you can paint over it, and there's different layers. But with watercolors, they, it's so much harder to fix an error or a problem because
Mhm.
they tend to bleed into each other. So this is why she likes oils. And of course, in the first book, she's had a hard time with her painting because she's still kind of trying to get over the parents being
Mhm.
gone.
Yeah.
But that's part of her character arc too. She sees the world as a painter. And
Yeah.
she talks about the colors and paint tones like Naples yellow or um, Viridian or sable, or so that kind
Yeah.
of is helpful to me.
That was one of the things I really enjoyed as well, is the oil color names just popping up here and there. And it just paints it makes, when you're, as a reader, when you're reading it, it just makes it pop. It makes the whole town kind of just this beautiful oil color, vibrant, saturated place that I want to be and walk around.
I hope so. Absolutely.
So Jill is curating her first national exhibit. And you've already mentioned that you have a connection with the director of the art center in your town. How is a national exhibit different than a local, and how much research are you doing with this, with your director friend?
That is also a good question. I do quite a bit of research because art was not my thing in college or beyond. So Christine Gilbert is able to give me an awful lot of help on that. And in the first book, her first exhibit was just local, and it was people who had lived in the area at some point in their life. And she did have a juror, and they did win different awards. But a local exhibit is much easier, obviously, to put on than a big national juried exhibit.
Mm-hmm.
So in the second book, she has her first national exhibit, and she is so excited because artwork is coming into her from all over the United States to her little tiny town in the Midwest. She has to first of all come up with all the dates. When does the artwork have to be in? When does the juror have to figure out what's going to be in it? So first she starts with the dates. Then she comes up with a theme. And her theme in the second book is harvest time, which could apply to a lot of different things. She finds a juror in Philadelphia named Anthony Ardiaga, and he is someone who is very much involved with rural life and artwork about rural life. So he's a perfect person to do this particular exhibit and to judge it. So then she puts out a call to artists, which explains all of the rules and the deadlines and who the juror will be. And people put their artwork online. There is a place you go online where you can put your artwork so that the juror can decide which pieces will be in the actual exhibit. So you might start out with 300 or 400 pieces of artwork, but end up with only 60. So he's got to make that decision.
Yeah, I didn't
Go ahead.
realize that the juror actually chose the work initially. I thought that would have been the art center. So yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about all art centers, but that's the way they do it here. So that's kind of what I used. And the judge decided the pieces, and then they are sent to the art center from all over the country. And then there's a date that Jill and all of her volunteers install them. And then she picks up the juror at the airport, and he shows up, and they have a big opening. And while he judges the pieces before the opening, and then the winners are announced at the opening. So that's kind of the way it works. And the first one in book one, Jill didn't manage to be there for a number of reasons. But in the second one, she's there, and everything just eventually works really well. So it's a lot of work, and I didn't know a great deal about it, and so I've learned a lot.
No, and it just comes out as just really natural, and it's like Jill is learning, but she's also got a lot of expertise, and it's really nicely handled. Wonderful job. So as part of that,
She spent several years in Chicago in the art scene before she came back home. So
yeah, and Chicago, wow.
yeah.
I love going to Chicago.
Yeah.
So part of this, we had weavers are added to the permanent location or exhibition. with like people giving weaving examples and
Right.
why did you choose that? And yeah.
We have, because we have a Weavers Guild here,
Neat.
and I love going down and watching them on Wednesday afternoons. It's just intriguing because they have all different kinds of looms, and it's such an intricate process. And I'm going to show you here are a couple of scarves that I don't know how well you can see these,
Oh
but
no, it looks great.
it's a red and black one that I bought that is from our weavers, and this one also. And I buy a lot of these scarves as gifts,
Well,
and
that one
they're
kind
just
of matches.
gorgeous.
That one kind
Yeah,
of matches your book cover.
right. So, right. And it's intriguing to listen to them talk about their weaving experiences and, watch them work at the looms. And then they also can sell their products at the art center. So, just a very cool thing that I knew nothing about before I started working on this book.
It adds a really nice texture to the art center. So, what is next for you? Have already mentioned that the next book in the series has its title already. So, what is next for Jill and for you?
Well, I'm working on the third book now, which is Death in a Ghostly Hue. And each of the three books, I have a 3 book contract with Level Best Books. So each of the 3 books has kind of had a theme to it. The first book was about family and who your family is, whether you're related to them or not, and Jill coming back home. The second book is about second chances. Death in a Bygone Hue is about second chances, which goes throughout the book. The third book is going to be about forgiveness. And it's an interesting idea, I think, because all through this story, Jill's family has been very important. Excuse me. And her parents, of course, are no longer with them. And after being killed in this car accident with a drunken driver, which was just such a senseless thing. In the third book, the young man who was driving the other car comes back to Apple Grove and he's looking for redemption. And so that might, that presents right there a tremendous conflict, especially for Jill's family. Yeah. So that kind of is the way it begins. But also, Jill has started a senior group in the second book. So in the third book that I'm working on now, they're going to do a radio show of The Canterville Ghost by Oscar Wilde. And so you're going to see that going on in the Arts Center. And all of a sudden, there are going to be some kind of ghostly things that are going to happen at the Arts Center. We'll see how this goes.
Yeah, and they're always haunted. I've never been in a theater that wasn't, or an art center.
Well,
Oh,
this building is like, it was built in the 1870s, and it is a little, you could imagine it being haunted.
oh, I'm
Yeah.
sure there's stuff going on there.
Yep.
Um, so I kind of want to change gears just a little bit. And because you were president of the Guppy chapter of Sisters in Crime. And just for our listeners who are writers, can you tell us a little bit about the Guppy chapter?
Sure. At this point, I'm actually the past president, but I was the president for 3 years. And now Connie Berry is, and she's just a wonderful new president for us. The Guppy chapter is actually a chapter of Sisters in Crime, which is a national organization of mystery writers. And they have maybe 30 some chapters all over the country and in other countries. But the one chapter that's different is the Guppy group. And we're online only. So you can live anywhere and be in this group. And our biggest thing is teaching people how to write mysteries.
Yeah.
So we're a very much, excuse me, a learning chapter. Sorry. And And we have classes, we have critique groups, we have manuscript swaps, we have so many programs. And Guppy stands for the great unpublished. So while many of us are published, there are many of us that aren't. There's about 1,000 members. And you can
It is the
learn more
largest.
about it. I'm sorry, what?
It's the largest chapter of Sisters in Crime.
It is. There's over 1,000 members and we're all over the place. So whenever our steering committee has a discussion online, it's like we're in 4 different time zones. So it's gets a little complicated, but it is a wonderful group that supports mystery writers of all kinds, thrillers and historical mysteries. And yeah, it's a great group.
That's awesome. Okay, so where can our listeners find you? Your social media, things like that nature.
Okay, well, I have a website and I have a blog on my website, and it's all you have to do is type in Susan Van Kirk as one word and it'll come up. So it's, in my name. And I'm also on Facebook. I have a personal Facebook page where if you want to see pictures of all my grandchildren, great. But I also have a Facebook page that's Susan Van Kirk author. And then I am on Instagram. I think on Instagram I'm under S.I. Van Kirk. I is my middle initial. And I am no longer on Twitter. I was on Twitter, but I left that particular.
Twitter is changing so much.
I know.
His vision for it is that it turns into something more like Teams than Instagram.
Yeah, well, that's when I got off. I'm also on Writers Who Kill, which is a blog site for mystery writers. There are about 15 of us, and I do a blog post on that once a month. So Writers Who Kill is the name of that. Oh, name of that blog.
All right. Well, I would like to thank you again for chatting with me today. This has been so much fun. Death in a Bygone Hue is a great read, and I really encourage everybody to pick up a copy and the first one as well. Just get into this series. So thank you all for listening to Blackbird Writers Presents Author Interviews.
Okay, thank you, Sharon.
Thank you.